Welcome everyone to an all new episode of TV Dinners. I am Jen. If I sound a little sleepy, it's because I am. It's been a really long week again. Hopefully today though we'll maybe I don't know, maybe we'll wake up the conversation a little bit with some of our favorite TV tropes. Funny. I got to get a little bit of news out of the way. Um, I guess on everybody's mind is sort of the season finale of House of the Dragon. Um, mm, I don't know how you all felt about it. I loved it, and inevitably, every time an episode of House of the Dragon comes on, and I mean, I'm laughing a little bit, and I'm not trying to mock anybody's pain. I swear to God, but it's like such an inevitable thing. That I feel like this definitely needs to be a podcast in the future.
Yes.
Um, we I end up seeing an article about how House of the Dragon somehow alienated some portion of the population. Some portion of the population found it terrifying, triggering, just absolutely horrible that something happened. And I'm starting to really feel like, man, we need to have a conversation about sanitizing our fiction because we can't deal with our own pain. And again, this is not to make light of anybody's trauma or, make anybody feel bad, but wow. I mean, this is big. And I've seen like four now from big news article sites, Huffington Post, um New York Times had one. I mean, it just seems sensationalizing for sensationalizing sake. But we definitely should have a talk about that. Secondly, um, some in very interesting news. HBO Max released for spooky season the movie Barbarian,
Mm.
which kind of came like at breakneck speed from theaters to HBO Max. Super cool for us. Um, but wow, that movie was disturbing. Um, I don't know if it was like scary, like, I can't walk into my room now because the lights are off and I'm gonna be terrorized. But psychologically, don't watch that movie alone. Watch it with somebody that you can decompress with because wow, there's a lot to it. So that was kind of cool. Other news, in sort of a surprise move, not surprise move that I'm sure we're all expecting, and we even talked about this pre-show. Disney Plus is buying the world. More mergers with Disney Plus announced this week. Um, More interesting things. In fact, Hulu sent me a nice little email to say that their terms of service were changing. And basically, it was, hey, listen, we're going to be subservient to Disney Plus now. So any problems, you'll know who to take it up with. It was pretty funny. What else do we got in kind of TV news? The saga with, well, that's movie. We'll stick that in the movie category and leave that over there.
We
What
didn't
else do
talk
we have?
about Rings of Power.
You know, we didn't talk about Rings of Power, and and actually, I was thinking that that should also be a podcast by
It
itself. But
really should, yeah.
but I did sort of address at least a little bit that the end episode of Rings of Power that people were sort of losing their mind over, um, was not really a big surprise. Although, this is why I think it should be a podcast because there are fans of the source material, and the fans of the source material are going, it wasn't that big of a surprise. And then there were fans of the show itself going, who have only ever seen the movies, who were very surprised because they don't know the backstory. Um,
Right.
and so it was kind of interesting. It was very interesting the way that there was like a fan split in their reactions. Both super good though. Both super good. Also, I heard that Amazon has a huge bump now because of Rings of Power to their Prime uh viewership. There are so many more people now who are basically, I have to say, give a shout out to Amazon Prime for kind of being the little engine that could. They have been slowly churning away at maybe not the quantity, although it's Amazon, so let's face it, they've got a lot. But their originals are really, really good. I mean,
Mhm.
when they put their mind to something, right? When they put their mind to something, it comes out great. And Wheel of Time is coming back, so we've got that to look forward to. Um, we also have at the end of this year, also with something else from Amazon Prime that's coming very shortly, and I thought it's really good. The other one that was sort of epic, which oh my gosh, yeah, it's really epic, and now I can't remember the name of it. Um, it is well, I'll get back to it. In any event, there are some really awesome things that are happening on Amazon Prime, and they are definitely worth checking out. Also, there was the end finale because we didn't do a show last week of She-Hulk, which you know what, fanboys, calm down. It was good. It was freaking good, and I loved Kevin. I thought that was just a phenomenal idea. The whole thing was just really good. It felt like Deadpool but for women,
Mm.
and that made me really happy because so much of the especially the Marvel universe is really geared toward men, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's not, it really isn't. They know who their demographics are, uh but it's nice to have a little tiny sliver carved out that feels like, yeah, they're paying attention. So let's
Hold
see,
on.
last thing is Joss Whedon. Gotta talk about Joss Whedon for a second because I have a feeling that this may end up being important to TV dinners. The serialized editions of Marvel and now DC are always contentious. And over the past couple of days, we found out that Joss Whedon is going to take over the creative kind of aspect of DC for HBO Max. And I thought that that was really interesting. Not HBO Max, I'm sorry, for Warner altogether. But I have a feeling that it will impact what we see on HBO Max quite a bit. And I thought, of course, I'm not 100% sure how and I just said Joss Whedon, didn't I? And you know what? This is why I need to take a bigger nap during the day and not a shorter one. James Gunn.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I can't believe that I said that. Um, I, I I'm a little confused right now about where or in what direction they're actually going, but I have a lot of faith in James Gunn, which I wouldn't have had in Joss Whedon, by the way, to lead DC in a at least quasi intelligent way. And I did have this conversation yesterday with Josh about now all they need to do is really kind of like give us the understanding about where is the Zack Snyder piece in all of this. Do we have actual canon that we can consider lore in this universe, or should we just take everything with a grain of salt and pretend whatever comes next is actually canon? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where things go, but I do have some faith in James Gunn to, maybe see what's good, what's going to be happening. Um, and let's see, is there anything else in TV that was like super interesting? I mean, lots of little things went on.
Nothing new, but I just found out the Golden Girls is on Hulu, and that, like, really excited me.
Yes, Golden Girls is now on Hulu to everybody who hasn't seen it that should have.
Yes.
Um, looking at you, Josh.
I
Um,
was going to say I feel targeted. And just an FYI, over the last 3 days, I've already watched the first season. So there.
Yay!
nice.
I just watched the pilot last night with Mac, and he was like, "Why are you making me watch this?" And I was like, "Oh, come on. Thank you
Oh,
for being a friend."
it's so honestly, it's funny. It is dated. It is dated, but it's dated in sort of like a really awesome nostalgia way, you
Yeah.
know? Kind of like, your favorite casserole never gets old because it just tastes good. It's warm, it's friendly, it's who cares if the ingredients are 50 years old? Doesn't matter. Um I'm trying to think if there was something else though. I thought that there was something else that was coming to TV or not. Oh, I know. Uh, so not for this week, but something to keep on your radar. Um, we did finally sort of get a hint about to everybody who follows The Witcher, um, that Blood Origins, they have a date for it now. It's December 25th, so we'll get to see that on Christmas Day because nothing says Christmas
Like Witcher,
like
right?
The Witcher. Yeah. I don't
I
know,
mean, he's
guys.
hot. He
The-
looks kind of like the young
but
Santa Claus, right?
but
Like with the
Geralt
silver
isn't
hair.
even going to be in it.
Oh, well, that's lame.
Because it's Blood Origins.
Oh,
It is the Witcher world. It is the continent before the conjunction of the spheres. So to everybody who knows the Witcher universe, that is basically before they even started making Witchers, which kind of makes the title a slightly misnomer, you know? Maybe
yeah.
you shouldn't lead with the Witcher. But anyway, it's the world before the conjunction of the spheres, and it's kind of the stuff that led up to where we are now. It is interesting, and I think it's going to be a very cool concept. But we aren't even going to get a full season of The Witcher until summer of next year. Yeah, I know. Like, what is going on? So there's that. Um, and I'm sure that there is more happening, but a lot of things that are happening right now is movie universe, and since we're not in the movie universe and we're only in the TV universe, we'll just keep it to the TV for now. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about tropes, and I have to say I don't know a single person who doesn't have a favorite TV trope. They just don't usually recognize them. um it's an interesting thing if you try to ask somebody, "Hey, what is a trope? What do you feel like is a," and especially if you say what's a TV trope. If you ask people what is a TV trope, they generally tend to say something like, "Well, it's when a show does the same thing over and over again. Like then that's the trope, right?" And I'm like, yeah, okay. Maybe let's try this a different way. Let's try and think about tropes a little bit differently. The idea of a trope that is that it covers a kind of expected behavior that characters or a story will have. It's not necessarily a just a repetitious behavior, although it can be a repetitious behavior. But it's a device. It's a storytelling device, much like an extended metaphor, much like an overarching big plot that you might have. Your tropes fit into those little corners of, especially in TV, places where you need to make sure that people understand what is happening without necessarily calling it out narratively, like specifically, without making it just in your face. You throw in a trope, and a lot of times those tropes really kind of speak for themselves. We'll go over some of the ones that we kind of all know and love the most. But let's see. I'll read you what TV tropes identifies as the definition for TV tropes. A trope is a storytelling device or convention, a shortcut for describing situations the storyteller can reasonably assume the audience will recognize. A lot of our TV tropes are very heavily anchored in pop culture. Some of our TV tropes are they're tropes because of material that has come before them. And I'll explain what that means as we get into some examples. Um, I'm going to use a movie as an example here, even though we want to stay with TV here. But I'm going to say that one of the best uses of tropes that I saw this year was in a movie called The Black Phone. And the levels of tropes were huge, but more than that, they were well used, they were well executed, they were placed so that the audience could understand what was going on with an extremely limited amount of information. And it really worked. So that's basically what we're talking about when we talk about tropes. I'm going to introduce my panel here, and then we are going to talk about these and see if we can come up with some interesting tropes ourselves. And maybe we'll come up with ones that people don't normally think of too. I'm going to start with Tori. Tori, how are you tonight? And I'm so sorry that we missed you last week. I'm so
I
sorry
know.
that we didn't have a show last week, but
I
we're really
know.
happy that you're back.
Thanks. Yeah, internet stuff. Like he likes to build things, my boyfriend, and didn't realize that he had like jarred of a wire, and so he didn't know what happened to the internet. And I was like, I don't know what happened to the internet. My phone's working, but it wasn't. My phone sucks, so I couldn't do StreamYard on my phone. But anyway, I'm back, and I'm happy about that.
Yes,
And
this.
we
Okay.
got some stuff going on too. With we just came up with another show idea, and I'm doing something with Kinte, and I think we should talk about that at the end because it's kind of exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is also why I don't keep jars in my house, because I don't want anything ajar. Okay, that was my humor for the night. Good night, everybody. Okay, and Josh. Josh, how are you tonight?
I am good.
Awesome. Very awesome. Thank you for not commenting on that last joke. That was very sweet. I appreciate it very much. I'll start off with you, Josh.
Yo.
Do you have a favorite TV trope?
Well, I think one of my favorites, just off the top of my head, is the opposites attract best friends kind of deal, where
Mm.
you take two completely, different characters that shouldn't have anything in common, and yet somehow they become a great duo that you don't want to live without ever watching again. Uh, an example that comes to my mind is Troy and Abed from Community.
Oh yeah.
Troy, the
Yep.
cool athlete, Abed, the you know I don't think they ever actually say autistic, but the movie nerd with some social adaptation
Yeah.
difficulties, and yet Troy and Abed in the morning.
Um, you know, okay. So I'm also going to further throw into what I think tropes have become. Not what they technically are, but what they've become. As things that never happen in real life for 500, Alex. The TV tropes that I am the most fond of are the ones that are least likely to happen in the universe as it is.
Mm-hmm.
They're great narratively, but the reason that the trope exists is usually because we're too stupid to understand that that's where this is supposed to be going. And again, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, I rely on tropes so much because even I don't see oftentimes where people are trying to go. So yeah. Uh and um that one is really interesting, because do you know anybody in real life that has ever had that happen to them?
No, I that kind of it does kind of like tie into what I'm going for too. And this is funny that he said that.
Do you know anybody, Josh?
I mean, off the top of my head, you got people that are good at being sort of social chameleons, where they blend in with pretty much any group they go to. But when you have two people like the two I mentioned, where they're just completely polar opposites, but become an amazing set of best friends. No, I can't think of anybody in real life that, uh, because usually people just kind of hang with the people that are like them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's why cliques exist. That's why the goth kids hang with the goth.
Yeah.
I guess they're emo now. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes. Okay. Well, I just thought I would, ask in case what I notice is like completely wrong, but I don't think it is. Okay, Tori, what about you? First of all, what is your favorite trope? And secondly, have you seen it in real life?
Okay, so I'm thinking like the nerdy mousy girl and the popular dude, like kind of like as a, you know what I mean? Like
Yes,
there's
exactly.
or like vice versa, like
Tori,
yes.
just take off your glasses.
Why? Is this bad?
No,
Oh, is it me? Is it me? Yeah. It's like she's all that except it's like a TV show. But you know what I mean? Like because honestly, when does the popular guy ever be like, "Oh, I don't want a cheerleader. I really want that artsy girl." Cuz that never happened to me in high school. I can
sometimes there's a bet involved.
yeah, sometimes there's a bet involved, you know. And it just
Okay, so this one is called Give Geeks a Chance.
okay, so it is a good trope. Okay, got it.
Yes, and give geeks a chance is usually when either woman or man, but let's face it, in a lot of fiction, the geeks are often the guys.
Yeah.
Um, Although that is sexist and ridiculous, and I'm here on behalf of all geeks to say we are women too.
Yes.
Um,
We
but
have
but absolutely, it's always and it always it's interesting because as you kind of move forward up into the more subtle tropes, you get ugly guy, hot wife,
mhm.
or hot wife, ugly guy, right? I'm sorry, or you get like ugly wife, hot guy. Those things are those things actually I think we kind of do see, right? Because beauty is relative and
And
subjective. We don't
money
always
buys a
see
lots of
that.
stuff.
That is super true. But the give geeks a chance is uh as somebody who lives through this, I can pretty much tell you that yeah, no, that usually doesn't happen.
No. It
I mean,
doesn't.
unless you're angling for I really need geek information. My computer's broken. Oh my god, you look amazing. Do you want to
Yes.
come over to my house and fix my computer? Yeah,
And
that's
I'll
the kind
I'll
of stuff.
make you dinner. Oh,
Exactly.
can't
Yes,
turn
on
down a
TV
free
this is a
dinner.
big one.
I'll pu-
This is
I'll
definitely a big
I'll
one.
make sure that I don't know anything about computers cuz that makes it 10 times better
Ugh.
as a TV show.
It's a, it gets a little bit heavy sometimes because when you are the living trope of something narratively on TV, it's definitely a little bit discouraging because you realize, wow, I didn't realize that my life was quite so pathetic. Yeah, there's that. Um okay, so let's talk a little bit. I'll tell you what my favorite one is first. My favorite trope is um is the trope where the the hero, whoever the hero is, has to tell us that they are the hero by being the one who is dressed the best. That's
Mm.
one of my favorite tropes. And the reason that it's one of my favorite tropes is because it reminds me of how subtle our brains are, how subtle they work when it comes to who do we consider to be the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are the guys that are usually dressed better than everyone else, even if they're dressed terribly. They're
But
dressed better than all the other terrible people.
yes, see, villains are the same way. Like the head villain is always snazzily dressed.
Yes,
I the Joker.
but snazzily dressed and dressed eclectically,
Yes.
or dressed with some kind of like crazy feature, some rhinestone belt from the 70s that nobody else wears but he wears it perfectly. Yes, there's those kinds of things. Also in obviously in American cinema and TV, we very much always identify our really good guys by wearing red, white, and blue.
Oh yeah.
If you're wearing red, white, and blue, well, we know you're here to be Superman, and yes, you
Well,
are
we can.
instantly the
We
hero.
also share that with Puerto Rico and France. So
It's true, but we're the only ones that do it, so
I know
there's that.
America.
Oh my gosh, it is kind of funny. Only we think that it's patriotic to dress up in our flag. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite tropes. Again, not because the trope itself is super awesome, but it really reminds me that our flavor for understanding things is so subtle, like down to that. It can be really simple. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about about some of the tropiest TV shows around. Um, anymore, unless it's like She-Hulk, which I feel like went out of its way to be the Deadpool of TV. Um, and was extreme. It made fun of tropes so bad, and it was really hilarious. But we don't have a lot of sort of in your face trope TV, except with one notable exception. On TV right now, there is a show called Ghosts, and Ghosts is basically a B&B that was set up, and the one of the owners of the B&B falls down the stairs, and when she wakes up, she can see ghosts and she can talk to them. Amazing. It's actually such a silly principle, but it's such a great show. It's based off of a BBC broadcast of the same, and it's also similarly as good. The BBC one is just as good. Um, the each one of the characters is basically a trope, and they live up to their tropes almost every single episode, which is amazing because it never gets stale.
Let me
And
ask you a question. Would
yeah,
like a butler being British be a trope?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, because that's what we consider to be proper. We consider it to be the epitome of good manners to be British, right? We
Right.
that and that is definitely our perception. Because if we throw a British butler into a Korean drama, it would make zero sense. The trope
Right.
wouldn't work at all, right? But yes, for us, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, so I know this is a bit of a challenge. It kind of comes out of left field, but what are some TV shows that you can think of that really that use a lot of tropes, like not just a couple, but a lot of tropes? Sometimes the longer that a TV show goes on, the more tropes there are in it. I will get you started by saying that Supernatural was one of the longest running TV shows on the planet, and
Ever.
it was so tropey that it actually made me happy. I mean, every trope that you could think of was in Supernatural. I can't even think of a trope really that was like missing that I couldn't somehow shoehorn into Supernatural somehow. Um so what
I
are
had a podcast with this lady who was very much a super fan of Supernatural, and every time we would talk about whatever topic we were talking about, she would somehow turn it back into something supernatural, and I was like, it was so annoying.
You see, Supernatural is relevant even when it's irrelevant.
Yes, I'm like, oh my god, this is
Okay,
crazy.
so what are some ones that you guys can think of? Josh, can you think of any TV shows now that are like super tropey?
Oh, that are on TV now?
Well, okay, let's say in the past 10 years.
Because the first one that came to mind is still Community,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
even though the point is Dan Harmon was trying to do, I think, was uh, shine a spotlight on some of these tropes and really make fun of them. Everything, like I said, the best friends, the curmudgeony old man.
Hmm.
Let's see, the will they, won't they, that played a predominant role, especially in the first season, and and throughout, as far as several different character pairings, and the the I guess the smart kid, if you want to put it that, the suave, lead. the ladies' man who just no matter what he does, he's able to pick up anybody he wants.
Yeah.
And
It it
for some reason,
it
that was
it,
Joel McHale.
Yeah, that was funny. That's a
it
trope in
reminds
itself.
me. It reminds me a lot of The Office in the way that The
Yes.
Office did that. The Office
Yes.
also did that, and
That's what I was
and
gonna say too. That sucks. Like, I have another one though.
the Office did it like constantly. Like there was never, I don't think there was ever an episode of the Office that didn't have 3 or 4 or 5 really deeply embedded tropes underneath everything. And it did make it actually, I think, that much more hilarious.
You did.
All right, go ahead. What's your idea, Tori?
Mr. Belvedere. I was just thinking of the British butler and like
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't in the past 10 years, but absolutely that is. And
and
also
then
that family. Oh my God, who is that family?
I know, right? Right. And then
Good God.
also Smallville.
Smallville.
Yeah,
See,
Are you
about
sure you don't mean Small Wonder?
no, the show Smallville about
with
Superman.
Superman as he was growing up.
Yeah.
See, I didn't like Smallville, so I
I didn't either, but
kind of
I
stopped
was
watching it.
yeah.
I held on up until the not to turn this into a Smallville podcast because Tom Welling and the other guy pretty much have that covered, but it was the first time I think that they really messed up Doomsday in media. Uh,
Mm.
he was a he was what an EMT. Doomsday was an EMT that had like a werewolf like thing that turned him into Doomsday. And now I'm not sure which messed it up more, Smallville or Zack Snyder. That's up for debate, but that's not a debate for now. Sorry, I had to get it off my
Yeah,
chest.
I do think. Okay, so speaking of which, that was actually a good segue because tropes can add a lot of depth and a lot of nuance to a show, even and humor. I mean, as like we're talking about with The Office, and even really with Community as well. But tropes can also be okay, they can be overused and they can also detract from the show. And I'm gonna tell you something that happened to me recently, and then I will ask you another question about this. I, I was at a writers' convention, a virtual writers' convention, and we were having conversations about how fiction has changed over the past 10 years. And it really has changed a lot. And part of the dynamic change in fiction over the past 10 years and what we're seeing in our entertainment, especially, is the idea of inclusivity and a kind of representation that hasn't been around before, but also the starkness of the world. We have been very drawn to very rigid, dark shows, and part of that is kind of a cultural malaise that we are feeling right now. So shows that make us feel really good can sometimes feel a little bit out of place. They can also pick us up, but they can feel a little bit out of place sometimes because we're not seeing it reflected in the world. So we get
Yeah.
attracted to these like really dark shows because we're like, yeah, this is
The
exactly what I'm feeling
pandemic
right now.
really did that. The
Y-
pandemic really did that to us. Like
Yep,
it
yep.
really
It
shut the world down. That's and can't say it wasn't going to come. Like we have pandemics every few hundred years. It's not uncommon. I
well,
hate
it
to say it.
the jaded sense I think of audiences really kind of fueled a lot of fiction to become darker. Okay, so having said that though, I said to someone that after I had read their material, I thought that they were using a certain number of tropes in their narrative fiction, um, maybe a little too liberally, just a little bit liberally. And they were very offended, very offended. And the reason that they were offended is because they said that any tropes at all are bad. You should never have tropes in your fiction. This is, and I first of all, don't think that that's even possible because the zeitgeist decides what a trope is and what isn't a trope. It's not like you as the author get to choose what the trope is and then the audience goes, "Oh yeah, I see that." And secondly, the whole point of fiction is to get a point across. So if your point is, I want to tell the world about this thing that happened over here, and you use all these other literary devices, there's no reason that you cannot use tropes. But like alliteration, if you use too much of it, it starts feeling like Dr. Seuss, or, like you're trying too hard. And so the, even writers don't always really understand the necessity, but also the kind of backing off of tropes as well. And so what I wanted to ask you guys is, because I can think of a couple of these. Do you know? Can you think of any movies? Can you think of any TV shows where the trope or the tropes actually detract from the show itself? Like the whole show feels like it is just one long trope, or the tropes that they do use are so mismanaged that it actually makes the show feel like it's not really working.
I'm gonna say this one because I don't know why this show bothers me so much. It shouldn't. In all intents and purposes, it was the OG of adult cartoons, but The Simpsons. Like
Mm.
for some reason, it just gets under my skin. Like
I,
Habib and like just Bart Simpson being a little rebel and like all of that. Like it just I don't
Should I
know.
boot her
Maybe
now, Chin?
Okay, so okay, so Tori, I'm not defending The Simpsons here, because I have my own problem with South Park, where
okay.
I can barely sometimes get through South Park because I but I'm going to say it this way. Okay, both South Park and The Simpsons do something very similar. They are purposefully going over the top with the trope, with the sarcasm and the irony and the, hey, look at this,
Yeah.
for a fairly specific purpose. And it's it isn't to make us feel wholesome and good. It's really kind of the way that I see South Park and The Simpsons in a lot of ways is, it is like modern day shaming. And again,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, it's actually kind of good, because sometimes we really need that. Like we need to understand what we are doing that is ridiculous so that we can stop being ridiculous, because if nobody calls it out, how you just grow up in that culture and you don't even realize it. um but the purposeful point behind being the larger than life trope, like you're saying, for some people it can be really distracting because you don't get it. Well, and it's not just that you don't get it, it's that the trope itself starts to take on a meaning by itself rather than being
Mhm.
incorporated into the fiction, which is how it works the best, right? Um, because I mean, personally, I think the best use of trope work ever, not to keep going back to Joss Whedon here, was Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
No, yeah.
Ironically, that's where TV Tropes came from. The website called TV Tropes, that's where it came from. It came from them breaking down basically Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it consistently used tropes as a method to deliver information and nuance throughout the series. But I think you're right. And again, like I said, I have my problems with South Park for that very same reason, because of course I know that they're laughing at the trope itself, but when I watch it, there are times when I am literally annoyed by the use of the trope as a way to convey the message, when I feel like, Stop it. That's enough." And I
Mhm.
get the same feeling, I think, from you about how you feel about The Simpsons. So,
But they're so
I get it.
similar in like how they're dynamic, and there's even an episode of South Park where they're like, Simpsons did it, Simpsons did it, like, and it's true. So like I can see why we would just definitely see eye to eye on that
Well, also
one.
we're definitely not alone. I mean, you can still enjoy The Simpsons and South Park, which I do both, and still find aspects of both to be annoying.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh. Give us your ire and wrath. What say you?
Well, even though it's a show that I absolutely loved, one of the tropes that made me cringe every time it started playing out was during the first two seasons in particular of Superstore with
I never saw
the, uh, the will they, won't they between Jonah and Amy. I just, I don't know. Why does every, sitcom have to take two people and say, well, this is going to be the romance that we're building for two seasons until it finally happens. And quite frankly, I just, for once, would like to see two characters that do very well as friends. I don't know, stay friends,
Yeah.
at least in this particular situation.
So I have a trope for that. That is going to be my catchphrase for the entire episode. Um, there are several around the platonic friendship. Um, there are there's something called the platonic cave. That's one. There is the platonic declaration of love, which is sort of like, uh I love you, uh, but we have to remain friends. Um there is the uh not my girlfriend, a la Chowder. I don't know if you
Mm.
guys know who Chowder is. Um, which is another one, which is like, you're not my girlfriend, but actually secretly, yeah, I kind of that's what I actually want. And okay, so I'm gonna say something about tropes here that I think is maybe a little bit overlooked. Um, and one of the reasons that we find them to be both fascinating and confounding at the same time, and it has to do with exactly what you just said, Josh. In our everyday life, we our brains, the reason that we're just so successful as a species even is because our brains are always looking for patterns. We're always looking for individual instances of things that we can tie into bigger instances of things to make them make sense, because the world is coming at us at full speed continually, and processing all of that information, processing all of that data, if you will, is difficult, if not impossible, if we can't see patterns and kind of like a matrix of where to fit it in so that it makes sense. So the leaves are falling. Does that mean that all the trees are dying? No, it doesn't, because we've seen this before. This is the sense of pattern that we know. Every season this will happen. We know, and then you build on that. Okay, so we know the leaves are falling, therefore now we have to go do this. It's those kinds of things. But the human brain is so successful at this that even when we don't want to see patterns, we see patterns. And the trope is supposed to help us separate that, so that when we start to see a pattern and it isn't the pattern that the author or that the work itself is trying to convey, you can separate it and you can say, no, 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 that's not what's happening. This is what's happening. When it comes to the platonic friendships, the problem that I think that we have in our fiction, and man, tropes don't even come close to being able to fix this. Uh we don't trust platonic friendships. We If you're going to trust somebody, you have to somehow always have some level of love interest in them. And I'm not talking about this is in real life. I'm talking about this is what we see on TV. Um, Very rarely do you have a opposite sex relationship where one partner can trust the other partner implicitly with no problems, no nothing, unless there is some hint of romantic undercurrent. And I think you're
It's
right.
very similar. It's
It's
very
very
similar to life, though, in my
well.
opinion.
Okay, so tell me, what do you think about that? Why do you think that that is? I mean, in terms of like what we're seeing narratively and how seeing that narratively, how does that, how do you think we interpret that?
See, I'm kind of a firm believer that it's really hard to be friends with the opposite sex. Like, have complete trust, have complete interest, want to talk to them every day, all day long, without there's being some romantic interest. Usually it's the guy wanting to have sex with the girl. He'll put up with a lot of bullshit if he thinks he's got a shot, you know? So, like, and it kind of carries over to fiction. Maybe the authors in all these situations of the TV shows are just hoping on that trope, like, oh well, a lot of people experience this, so maybe everybody's going to experience this and think that. Does that make sense? Maybe.
Y- yes, and
Okay.
Josh, let me get your opinion on how you think that this like works from a backward standpoint. Do you think that our TV tropes, that are general entertainment tropes, do you think that they seek to reinforce what we feel, or do you think that they are um or that they well, I shouldn't say seek to reinforce. Do you think that we as a culture end up feeling that things are a certain way because of our TV tropes, or do you think it's the opposite, that we get TV tropes out of what we already experience? I mean, I guess there's a case to be made both ways, but do you think that it's more heavily in one direction or the other?
I can't really say it's heavily in favor of one or the other because there are times when I see things happening on TV following the simple patterns of life. You know, trope wise, you see like you said, the brain wants to see patterns, so it sees patterns. It finds them out there. But there are also times where I notice that something in my life may be, following a sitcom pattern, and I'm like, wait, is this a natural thing or is this just influenced over decades of watching really cheesy sitcoms? And honestly, I really couldn't give you an honest answer about what's influencing what. I can honestly say there are times where I've had to make decisions and I'm like, well, this is what they do on TV, so here we go.
You, you
Yes, I've
know,
done that too.
one of the tropes that I grew up with, which I do sometimes see a little bit different now, but not much, is the I just gotta call it like the clean house syndrome. I believed as a kid watching TV that nobody else's house was ever messy.
Yes.
That we were absolutely a terrible anomaly in the universe because our house was not clean, like not, well, not even not clean, it was clean, it was messy, like,
Yeah.
there were, we lived a lot like we we lived in an environment where having things be neat and tidy and tucked away was not, that wasn't a part of our experience. We just didn't grow up like that. But I grew up thinking that that was absolutely horrible. Like, what are we doing?
We're
Also,
hoarders. Yeah.
not even hoarders, just that we were just like, we're sloppy. We were not. That was absolutely not what the case was. And also that, like, our furniture was never what it looked like on TV ever. We always have. Why do we have to have this furniture on TV? They have this stuff, or the layout of a room. The layout of the room.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, the layout of the room is meant to basically be sort of the biggest and widest so the camera angles can capture the most in the room, right? But for me, it was like, why do we have all these little nooks and crannies? Why do we have a reading nook? Why do we have a TV center? Why do we have what are all these places? This isn't what it's supposed to look like. And it really messed up my brain. Um
Oh.
Seriously, like I really thought that we were just so anomalous. Okay, so that's one, that's
Can I
like
can I
an
mention
example.
what wrecked me in that sort of way?
Yeah, please.
Um, this is definitely an issue for I'd say American programming, and we've talked about it before. I think on the movie Potluck, but how about the idea that your average American family breakfast consists of
Yeah.
50,000 calories
Oh god, yeah.
and
Man,
every
and you know
type of
what? And
food
that
under
is
the
a
sun
trope.
covering the
That
table.
Yep. And then you
I-
pick a piece of toast and you eat one bite and then you leave.
yeah.
So there's this
Yeah.
entire continental breakfast laid out for you on the table, and you take one bite of toast, and then you're like, "Yeah, okay,
Wait,
I'll catch something at the
As
I,
you're
mi-
putting
office."
on your coat to run out to the bus stop. Yeah.
Uh
I missed that part because I actually sat down and ate all that stuff my entire life.
huh.
You know, it's kind of funny though because food in itself is a trope because like, you know, on TV
Oh,
they
it
have
can be. Oh
it,
my
you know,
god.
like on TV everybody eats all healthy. Like the Real Housewives of LA, they show their whole fridge and it's nothing but fruits and vegetables and it looks beautiful and like come on, nobody's
Yeah,
fridge looks
That's the
like that.
TV fridge.
Yeah.
yeah. That was definitely another one. And you know what? To this day, I still struggle with a refrigerator that isn't organized. And I think
I'm
it was one of
horrible
my
with
I think it was one of my kids, but it could have been one of my friends. I don't remember who opened up their fridge one day and said, "This is ridiculous. Like, I don't feel like I want to touch anything in here because it will upset the natural feng shui of it. Why does your refrigerator have feng shui? This is not normal." And that's another one that absolutely influenced by watching people on TV always have the right thing at the right time in their refrigerator. Like if you wanted something from your refrigerator, you would find it in your refrigerator. It wasn't
they
about did
have
your mom go shopping the night before.
they have bread rising, they have like cookies on command. Like I want to I would just like a fridge where the ice maker worked, honestly. Like I
This is
got
this is the other thing. The other thing is in our TV tropes we often forget that we are watching like the top 1% of people
mhm.
um who are clearly making the most money of
Yeah,
anyone. And they don't have the same constraints on budget, on
right.
y- help people to help them to do things, uh those kinds of things. That stuff actually matters too. And I'll say this though. The TV trope about what it is to be kind of quote unquote the perfect family, right?
Mm.
Part of the reason that I think that TV shows do that is so that the environment is as less distracting as it could possibly be. Excuse me. So what you have is like a room that is set up with everything that you could possibly need within arm's reach to make it perfect, because what you're trying to do is get to the familial drama, or the conflict of the episode. Although there are some special exceptions. Okay, so I'm going to call out some special exceptions. You ready?
Mhm.
MASH, which
I love
nothing
MASH.
nothing
Oh
was ever nothing was ever right there. Um,
no.
I don't know if you've ever I don't know if you've ever seen Sanford and Sons.
Yeah. Moving
But
on
there's another
up.
one where the house was that was pretty bad. But it's
What
still
about
organized, honestly.
Roseanne? Roseanne was a
I want to say Roseanne, but I feel like Roseanne was forced mess. Like it was
okay.
easy mess to clean up. There was never anything in Roseanne's house that made me think like, oh, somebody hasn't done the laundry for 2 weeks, or something like that. It was always like the things. It's kind of weird because like I feel like to a degree we're supposed to put our TV characters up on pedestals because that's what we want, right? We
Yeah,
want that.
we want to
But at the
watch
same
that though.
right, but at the same time, um it also really affects our choices in what we think is normalized and what isn't normalized. Like, do you know people that live I don't know if you know people that live, but I know people that live in New York City and their apartments are tiny. I mean, they're for them it's like, wow, this is a big apartment in New York City, and I'm sitting here going, holy crap, how do you live in this? This is insane. And it's normal. So but then when we watch people that live in New York City, they always live in these like almost palatial houses, even though they're supposed to be like the working middle class. And it's like, no, that disconnect is so huge if you really know anybody that lives there.
Here's a trope that ties into that. Like on HGTV, these people that have like these $700,000 budgets to buy houses, like
Oh, good lord.
really, like I was watching this in a doctor's office one day, and I was like, oh my god, like who can really afford these houses unless they're like successful doctors in their 50s? Like, I mean,
Well,
it just never made
or
sense to me.
Or if you live on Maui and in Hawaii, and the average cost for a house, just the starting cost, just a small little basic starter house, is $695,000. That's
Oh my
just a
god.
basic little house. That's not anything phenomenal. That's just a little tiny place. Yeah, there's a reason that living in Hawaii is so expensive. Okay, so I want to ask one more question before we run out of time. I want to ask you guys, what trope do you feel like TV uses that they completely get wrong? What trope do you feel like, just either bastardizes the idea or just makes you mad? Like, stop using that trope. I hate that trope. What do you think, Tori?
That's a hard one. I think it's like the the stereotypical like Indian or the stereotypical black man, like the Boondocks. Like I for some reason
Mm,
like maybe it's because it's not my culture. Maybe it's because I don't know as maybe I don't understand some of the aspects of that show, but like I think it's a little overdone, honestly.
mm.
Does that make sense? Like I don't know why that gets under my skin. Maybe because I'm not racist in any way and I don't think that there should be like any color like put to a person, but like uh it shouldn't be pointed out in a TV show like that anymore.
Yeah, I think sometimes the overtly things that are overtly racist, even when they're sort of like and especially when I guess they're trying to be funny about it, it rings very hollow. Unless the show is specifically about that. Like, I go
Yeah.
back to Sanford and Sons, and I think, I mean, half of the show in Sanford and Sons was people not being treated well because that's who they were. They couldn't escape it. That was part of their lives. And so like then it kind of works. But it doesn't work, you're right, when it's like, here's my half Indian friend, and you invite them to a dinner party and they don't know what to do because
Yeah.
haha, this is a white person party. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's just ridiculous. Come on.
But
I
it
mean,
happens.
really?
It happens, yeah.
That I yeah, no. I mean, if you're yeah, no. I won't even get into that. All right, what about you, Josh? Do you have one?
It took me a second, but I found one. I think mine is the overly effeminate gay best friend.
Oh.
The, I mean, don't get me wrong, people like that exist, but when it becomes the only level of depth for the character, and they just have nothing else going on than to have that voice and the lisp, and just to be sassy. Uh, it might just be a pet peeve of mine, just to have characters without any depth. But this one in particular, you know, some people might not know this, but characters, people that identify with the LGBTQ plus, you know, spectrum, uh, have thoughts and feelings and emotions and range and depth. And we can move past um, the oh girl, I can help you dress for this date kind of person. I'm going to bring up Community, who again kind of turned the trope on its head with Dean Pelton. Let me read you a quote from the dean. It was an episode where the higher ups, his bosses, wanted him to be the first openly gay dean at a community college, and he tried so hard to be openly gay, and it was driving him crazy. Not because he wasn't, but as he puts it, first of all, I'm not openly anything, and gay doesn't even begin to cover it.
That's
And
a good quote.
another quote is, I think he said, "Gay is only 1/7 of what I am." Doesn't really go into what the other six things are, but just the idea that this character is so out there, so outrageous, but also is more than just the uh, the funny costumes and the blatantly hitting on Jeff Winger and you know this and that. He was an actual character that was genuinely hilarious, and I give that a lot of credit to the actor that did that. And also, he won an Oscar for writing, so he's pretty rad. But just overall, the idea of, well, this is Bruce. He's my bestie. He's a hairdresser. You know that can go the way of the buffalo, in my opinion.
I think mine is the Mary Sue traits. I have such a difficult time when I actually feel like the writers are writing into the script some idealized version of themselves that they tack into the story, into the narrative, as if that gives them some kind of legitimacy. I really, 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 really hate that. I also really hate, and it's pretty easy to define, even though sometimes it's a lot harder to really pick it. Um, the the plot demands it, where something happens in the story and clearly whatever the next action is, it's written because the plot says you have to have this. In other words, like I can't have a complete plot without this happening, and so
Mm.
this will happen. um yeah, no, that actually doesn't feel right. And it to me, that is that's really kind of a source of, I know we use this word too indiscriminately, but it really is bad writing. In the same way that I do not believe that we need to use as much Deus Ex Machina as we do. I hate that. I feel like if you have to insert some crazy thing that happens in order to save your characters at the end that you didn't build up at all and didn't even mention, and it just happens to be there at the very end because you need your characters to survive or they need to do something, that's just sloppy. That's a sloppy use of the trope. I really dislike that a lot. I mean, there's tons of them. There's like there are, I don't even know how many. I There has to be tens of thousands of common tropes, not to mention just sort of like, the way out there tropes. So this was a really good discussion. It only barely scratched the surface. But if you're interested in more, tvtropes.org is a phenomenal site to go and investigate. And honestly, sometimes if you watch something, um, like some TV show that you like, or an episode of something that you're like super into, and you look at what TV tropes has come up with as, hey, here's the tropes that we have identified, you'll see it in a whole new light. And it becomes eye-opening. It's a very interesting kind of way of looking and dissecting our fiction. Law and Order is one of those ones that like uses every trope under the sun at one point or other, and somehow it kind of works for them.
Yeah, ripped
Um,
from the headlines.
yeah, yeah, it's really, yeah, and I think maybe that's why, because it feels like it is so close to real life that we're like, yeah, okay, that's a trope that we live. We live this.
We're
Um, it,
there.
it's a very interesting conversation to have. I do want to mention, since we are at the end of the broadcast, and then I'll let you, Tori, take over a little bit so you can talk about your upcoming projects. I do want to mention, because I had originally thought that we were gonna marry in some of the 007 stuff. Amazon Prime now has all of the 007 movies available if you're a Prime member. Um, they they also employ 007 himself is a trope, which is sort of amazing. I mean, if you're an author and you're writing something and somebody emulates the 007 trope, it is, I can't think of a bigger shout out to your own genius than that. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into 007, and it's not always good stuff. I mean, sometimes we identify tropes and we roll our eyes because, oh my god, what a stupid trope. Um, but comprehensively, 007 seems to, I think, pack in about as many tropes as I've ever seen inside of a franchise. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, let you know that they're all there. If you start watching 007s from the beginning up until where we are now, it's a journey. You can really see that we have changed how we think about action, how we think about story, how we think about treating women, how we think about exercising our sort of whatever our current cultural crises are. They're all inside of 007. It's a super interesting kind of retrospective look at both cinema and storytelling. So I encourage you all to check that out. All right, Tori, tell us about your upcoming projects and what we can expect from them.
Okay, so me and Josh were just, throwing ideas back and forth, and we decided I've never seen Doctor Who. So we're going to explore the wonderful world of Doctor Who in a fresh new set of eyes. I'm going to tell everybody what I feel, and Josh is going to be the resident Doctor Who expert.
We're called Whovians.
Whovians. Okay, he can be the resident Whovian. I'm sorry. I will learn all this, and you'll have to teach me, a wise one. So, and I don't know what we're gonna call it yet, but
I'll bring a
that's
screwdriver.
okay. uh,
Better
In
be
case.
Sonic.
It will be. It absolutely will be.
okay, and then me and Kente Ferguson, we're going to
Just throwing his government name out there like that.
No, we're going to do a show about serial killers, like lesser known serial killers. And the twist is I'm going to be doing female serial killers and he's going to be doing male serial killers. And we're going to talk about some famous names and maybe some names that you don't really know. So we don't have a name for that one yet either, but that's coming really soon. I've already done my research for like 4. So we
It,
should
it
have like 2 more
it's
for the
definitely
shows.
going to be killer cornflakes.
Yes.
I just confirmed it. It's going to be killer cornflakes.
That's where she went. She had to go. But yeah, and then I am going to be starting the Infectious Geek. I found somebody who's eager to do the co-hosting with me, and so we're going to be getting that back together. And
Exciting.
yeah, and I think that we're going to explore the rules to surviving disaster movies. I already did one of rules to surviving horror movies, so I'm moving on to a different genre of movie. But there is definitely, as Scream would put it, rules to surviving these things. And if you know some of the rules, your chances of survival are that much better. But anyway, that's what's to come. And then let's see, we always have this show. And I really do think that we need a Rings of Power show. I'm right there.
Yeah, I do too. Maybe we can get Josh to help us pull something together for that. I feel like Rings of Power would be best served by having people that don't know nothing about the background lore, having some people that know a bit about the background lore, um, and then the rare people that have actually read the Silmarillion, because I know they're not many. I was just talking to somebody again. I have to go back to this. I was just talking to somebody who I was saying for Rings of Power, there are people out there who only know the universe that is the Peter Jackson universe, and it is significantly different from what the books of the Lord of the Rings is. And I'm not saying that, like, it doesn't change the journey. It's still the hobbits on a journey. It's still, they hit all the major high points, but there are many things obviously missing. I mean, it's a trilogy of books, and one movie can only fit so much in it. Despite the fact that they are super long, it doesn't matter. It's still, there still just isn't enough time. And the other thing is they took out things that were and changed things that were odd. Like, I don't understand why they took them out in order to, one of my favorites is to tell people and everybody gasps. The Army of the Dead never attacked the army that was on the field when they were at Gondor's, when they were at Minas Tirith. That didn't exist. That didn't happen. The Army of the Dead stopped at the Corsair ships. That was it. And Aragorn said, "Okay, you're released." Now that fundamentally changes how we see that battle, and that partly the reason that I bring that up even is because Rings of Power is a little bit different. But if you are relying on what you know from the Lord of the Rings, the movies, to make judgments about the Rings of Power, you might have some, let's just say, slightly uh misinformed sort of ideas about where they're coming from in the Rings of Power, as opposed to if you had read the source material. Or because even the people that read the source material don't know really what exactly is happening. I mean, they're using a tiny sliver of material in order to build this enormous universe. So there's a lot of speculation inside of it. But anyway, you're right. I think that would be a phenomenal show to get together. And so, actually, sorry, I didn't mean to interject all of that.
It's okay.
Josh, tell us what you're doing and what is exciting in your upcoming future, aka Friday.
Nothing.
Okay. I mean, that was exciting.
Oh well, I guess if you're talking about the wadcast, it's there we go. I can focus now.
Are you going to talk about how Elon Musk just fired the CEO, CFO, and head of legal counsel over at Twitter?
Nah, don't care about that.
Okay.
I mean, not as far as the Wadcast is concerned, because on the Wadcast, the Writers, Actors, Director podcast, every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, where Brandon and I talk about all things writers, actors, directors, and all of those wonderful jobs on a set in between that help bring our film and television shows to life. We
But isn't being on
celebrate it
Twitter
all.
isn't being on Twitter part of that? I mean, isn't that like isn't that actually like, if you're an actor, you're on Twitter?
Right, right. But it's more of a. Hmm,
Man, not anymore. Whew.
That's a social media thing.
There's
I
gonna
would
be a
consider.
big shakeup. I know, but it's funny how incredibly meshed Twitter as a platform is. Not so much Facebook, although a little
Right.
bit, but Twitter is to actors, directors, producers. Oh my god, it is just it's iconically enormous. And what is going to happen now is anyone's guess. It that wasn't, I don't know. Anyway, yes,
as
I'm
long as I
sorry,
still
Josh.
get to book guests from Twitter, because that's been the secret of my sauce. They're like, how do you get your guests for the podcast? These actors and writers and whatnot. And if I'm the one pulling the guests, I guess the secret's out. I usually go on Twitter and I'm like, hey, you want to be on the show? And they're like, yeah. And that's how you book.
Yeah, you really just ask people. Yeah, it's a hit or miss. Sometimes people ignore you. Sometimes people are like, "Yeah."
Looking at you, Kevin Smith. The
Oh boy.
invite's been out for a long time. Anyway, writers, actors, directors. What are we talking about? I don't know. It's not 10 minutes before showtime yet.
It's me. It's totally me with my show.
But I have been trying to finagle Brandon to watch Black Adam so we could do a right and proper review of the movie for this Friday show. So if he's done his homework, that'll be what the show is about. If not, your guess is as good as mine, and
Mhm.
we will see. You know what? Who knows? Maybe uh, talking about the effects of Elon Musk and buying Twitter, how it plays on you know people in the entertainment industry interacting with their fans. I don't know, just
It,
kind of throwing things out there.
I honestly, you know what? I really think that this is worth some discussion at some point because it is going to, maybe not today, because obviously, what, there's going to be some shakeups in staff. But I think I'm predicting right now that it's going to be what's a clean way to say this? It's going to be a poop storm. It is not going to be pretty. It's definitely going to not be good. Yeah. Oh boy. Can't wait to see what happens. I love watching other people's drama unfold. This is part of the reason that I love TV so much. Thank you, everyone on Twitter, for giving me such instant access to all your drama. It's awesome.
You know what? A,
Um,
a decent topic for TV dinners could be in the future. Um, TV news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Like,
we try to start out with like, what is sort of happening in and around, but there's some pretty deep topics that have come up recently, which I think definitely need a deeper dive because they really are going to affect how we interact with our media, with our streaming services, especially because just today we found out that the ad tier for Disney Plus is going into effect a lot earlier than they thought. Same thing with Netflix. And there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to experience Netflix differently now with ads. And with the Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, they didn't release it all at once. It's being released over a series of days, and they are trying to get people more in the zone for having released content over weeks to increase subscribership, of course, because you know you pay for Netflix for a month, watch whatever you want to watch, and then get rid of it, and that's what they're trying to avoid. So Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. So good idea. Very good idea.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Josh. I didn't mean to cut you off. What else is happening with you? Tell us about 10 to 1.
Well, now I can't even steal your thunder. You're just giving it to me. Every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, 2:30 Hawaiian, if I'm not mistaken. It is a little show Jen and I like to call 10 to 1. We create lists of really outlandish things as it's related to movies and films. I mean, we get really into. One list was our favorite fictional bands from films.
That was a good one.
That was fun. And more recently, we just wrapped up our month long series on spooky season.
Mm.
Last night's Masters of Horror episode, which, if you're into horror at all and you want to hear what our opinions on who the masters of the genre are, it's a great listen. We cover a wide breadth of the genre between our two lists. Next week, yes, it is the first week in November, but we are going to be talking about our top movies from the year that is 2022. I think that's going to be a
Okay.
lot of fun. I've seen right around 40 movies from this year. It surprised me when I looked at that number. It's like 40 from this year? From this year.
Well, we can always go
Okay.
back and revise, as we get into like Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I mean, I know there'll be some new releases, but
Yeah, Wakanda Forever is coming out next
oh,
month.
I'm so excited about that. The people who have advanced seen that are just over the moon happy with it. So
Hmm.
can't wait to see that one.
So I imagine that's probably going to wind up on not only one of my lists in the future as far as best of 2022, but many others. Because looking at my list, it's like I'm not saying I watched a lot of bad movies this year. I'm just saying there is definitely room for something to take the top spot.
Really the way that the show is, it's called 10 to 1 because it's one show, it's 10 movies, and it's 2 hours. That's really why it's 10 to 1. It's hilarious. Yes, it's very fun. We have a very good time, and I feel like I always walk away from that show with way more knowledge than I ever thought I would have going into it. So, I mean, coming out of it. So it's very good. I really like it a lot. Um, we over at moviesandmeals.com. Oh, I'm sorry, Josh. Finish what you were going to say. You didn't even give us the website. Give us the website.
If you want all of the links to the pertinent social medias, the merchandise page, that's right, merchandise for Wadco Media and all the Wadco Media podcasts, go to wadcomedia.com, where you will find not only the links, but quick bios of everybody that helps us put out all of these fine programs every week.
Awesome. Very awesome. So much going on for both of you. For me, I am going to try to finish out October this weekend and Monday with our Halloween fun experiment. We're going to try to do this over the weekend so we can post it to the blog before people actually would go do it. With Mrs. Lovett's meat pies for
Mm.
Sweeney Todd. Yes.
Yum.
And we have all kinds of bloody good stuff. We even set up um, a an apple shaving station with heavy
Ooh.
cream, whipped cream, so that you can like shave the apple. We came up with a bunch of silly ideas, but they are super delicious, really fun, and definitely all fit into the uh, terrible demon barber. I really love that show. I It's one of my most favorites. I'm really glad that that is not a series, though. I don't know if I could stomach it every single week. Um, One last quick thing before we sign off. I did want to mention that as we're moving toward the end of the year, more and more content is going to be available in sort of the streaming bucket. We've got a lot of things happening on Hulu, on Netflix, and Apple TV, even. I wanted everyone to sort of remember that some of the content that is happening right now um, is, it's older. It's not like some people are seeing things for the first time. I just met somebody who had never seen any episodes of The Good Nurse, and it just so happened to come out on streaming content platform, and they were super enthralled by it. So, there's still lots of good content out there. There's still lots of cool things to explore, and sadly today, um, the creator, well, I shouldn't say the creator, but the writer, director, lyricist, author, Jules Bass died today. Or actually died a couple days ago. He was the co-founder of Rankin Bass and did The Hobbit and Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and tons of others that I'm sure you probably know of. The Little Drummer Boy, just so many. So we sincerely wish his family the best, and we will miss Rankin Bass as a powerhouse of content that I feel like every single child knows and at least at least has seen Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So, okay, with that, I will wish you all a great week and we'll see you next week. Thank you to my guests. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Josh.